Hi, my name's Kyle Lyon. I'm a System Architect here at Solutions PT, and this is the third part in our mini Tech Byte series on how to set up the Performance and OEE module within AVEVA Insight. In parts 1 and 2, we went over creating our equipment, the various states that equipment can be in, some OEE calculation definitions for us to define what availability, performance, and quality we're tracking, some disposition reasons to track good and waste or rework production, and some of the other optional parts of AVEVA Insight's OEE module as well, such as the OEE data properties, which lets us track things like shift pattern or crew number or work order. In today's episode, we're going to be finally looking at using the production lines feature. Now that we've created all of our equipment and the various different states that they can be in, we are now going to model those into a production line. Now, production lines in Insight are ordered sets of equipment that model the layout of the production line, manufacturing line, or the assembly line in your physical site. A line is ordered such that each piece of equipment in the line is related to at least one other piece in the line that indicates the flow of product. Here's an example of a production line for producing mixed nuts. Cashews, almonds, and peanuts are fed into a roasting unit. Then they're coated with flavoring in a coater. And finally, they're weighed on a scale before being transported to one of the two bagging lines, where they're bagged and packaged for onward distribution. So, let's make a production line for our bottling plant. Firstly, we enter a namespace to tie this to. This can be any namespace you defined in your Insight solution, or we can make a new one. For our sake, since we've been using the CSVs that are built into Insight, we're going to give it the namespace of Austin. Next, we give the production line a name, and I'm just going to call it line 1. Next, we can provide a location to tie the production line to, which can be an asset that we've set up in AVEVA Insight. As you can see here, we've got a list of our ones that we currently have in this solution. But we've not made any assets in this particular series so far, so I'm going to leave this blank. If you want to understand what assets are and how to use them, we do have another Tech Byte on it on the channel. So we're going to leave that blank, and then we can go and click OK and go into the production line editor. So now we're in here, we can start modeling. So for our bottling process that we've been building, the first equipment is our filler. Our filled bottles then go onto the capper machine to be sealed. These filled and sealed bottles are then placed into the case packer. And finally, the cases are then loaded onto pallets for onward transport by our palletizer. So that's our really simple line. So now we just need to indicate the flow of materials through this line by defining connections between the equipment. So I'm going to hit the ellipsis and click connect, and connect our filler to our capper to our case packer, and so on and so forth. Next up, to calculate a line's OEE KPIs, we need to identify at least one piece of equipment as a bottleneck. The bottleneck determines our production line's maximum production rate. So logically, it should be the piece of equipment with the slowest production rate. For our simple bottling line, we're going to say that this is our filler. So I'm going to hit the ellipsis and mark our filler as the bottleneck, and we can see that the bottleneck symbol is now present. Do bear in mind you might have multiple bottlenecks in more complex production lines, like in our mixed nuts example from the help files, which has 3 feeder units, each defined as a bottleneck. Note that bottlenecks are additive if you have multiple bottlenecks in a single line. So here's an example of that. We can see that the coaters are marked as our bottleneck here. Now coater 100 has a target rate of 100 bags per minute, and coater 200 has a target rate of 150 bags per minute. So this would mean that the total line has a target rate of 250 bags per minute, because it's additive between the bottlenecks. So in theory, we're capable of producing 250 bags per minute, assuming that both coaters are operating at maximum. Each path also needs a production source equipment, which is used to determine the line's total good production count. The total waste production count comes from both the bottleneck and the production source equipment. So for our bottling line, we're going to say that our production source is our case packer. This is going to be the area where we sort of do our quality checks and where we can determine whether product is of good quality, needs rework, or is of waste quality for whatever reason. So we're going to mark it as a production source. And we can see that that icon is now present on our case packer. So looking at the slightly more complex version of the mixed nuts example, we can see that both the baggers here are marked as our production source. And we can set the default targets for our availability, performance, and quality in the production line editor too. But bear in mind that these might be overwritten by any values that we've specified in either our live data collection or in the CSVs that we've been looking at in parts 1 and 2. Since your ideal rates and specs may change between runs depending on the equipment in use in the train or what you're producing. They're also not required, so we're going to leave them as default for now and assume that these targets would likely come from a live data source, usually our ERP system per work order. And finally, we can look to publish the production line that we've created. To do this, we first need to validate it, which checks to make sure that there are no circular paths in the line, so there's a clear route through however many branches we have, and that at least one bottleneck and one production source are present. Once that's validated, we can finalize the line. And we can see here that our line is ready, and its version type is currently listed as draft. So initially, your new version of any line will be in a draft state to allow you to make any further changes. When your new version is published, it will replace any previous version of that line that was available for production runs. So we can click here, and since we're happy with our draft, we can click to publish the line. You can see that we can do this either from the ellipses or from the icons at the top. So now that we've gone through the full process for making a production line, let's make our second production line with the other equipment that we haven't set up into production lines to solidify the process in our minds. First, we click to add a line and we provide our namespace. The namespace we've been working with in the CSVs, the second one, is Houston. We're going to call this line 2 and we're going to leave it without an asset. Same flow, filler to capper, capper to case packer, and case packer to palletizer. We connect our equipment into the line to indicate the flow of product. And then we mark our bottlenecks and production sources. Finally, we validate and publish the line once we're happy. You can see there that we now have Austin and Houston set up as lines 1 and 2. So I'm going to put our line 2 into a fully published state. With our production lines created, let's have a quick look at what we can do manually to see what we've implemented in practice. Obviously, if you've been following along and hooked this up to real-time data sources, such as a demo application, you can start populating this with those. But for myself, I'll be keeping it manual. Note that I've got some data here that's indicating that we've been running for a little while. This is just because in this particular environment I run this demo quite often, so some data is retained due to the naming conventions. I can start a production run, so I can click Start Run here, and here I can enter various details about the production run, so the amount that we're planning to produce, how long we're planning to produce for, the ideal rate, so quantity that we want to produce, what we are producing, so in our case it's bottles, but we can change that to any unit of measure we have, and additionally some of the extra OEE data properties that we set up in the earlier parts, so I can define the crew, product code, and work order. So for our case, let's say that we're going to create 10,000 bottles. We're going to run for 2 hours, and we're going to have an ideal rate of 100 bottles per minute. We can click Start. We can see that that puts us in, and our availability is currently at 100% because everything is ready, and our target production rate and actual production rate are available, and our production line state has changed to runtime. So manually as an operator here, I can come in and I can add in good or waste production, as well as specify utilization events. Here we can see that the lists that we set up previously are available to operators either as standalone options or as expandable ones like we can see here. Planned stoppages has changeover, maintenance, and shift meetings. I can also come in and add a comment to any supplementary information regarding this utilization event. So let's come in and add some good production. Let's add 100 bottles of good production. And we can see that our values are updating as we go. So we can see that our current production rate, how we're doing towards what we actually are planning. Let's add a little bit of waste production. So we'll add in 20 bottles and we'll say that these had some problem with being overweight. We'll click add, and we can see that our performance data is now updating, and we'll continue to update as this production run goes on and as we play around and add more to it. And that's it for our 3-part series on setting up the Insight Performance module. I do recommend having a play with the production line that you've created just to solidify in your mind everything that we've done over the past 3 episodes. If you do have any questions about any of the topics that we've covered across this mini-series, or if you're interested in exploring AVEVA Insight and the wider Connect portfolio and how it can benefit your business, please do feel free to get in touch with us at Solutions PT. Thank you very much for watching.